Welcome back to Anatomy and Physiology on Catalyst University. My name is Kevin Tokoph. Please make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel for future videos and notifications. In the previous video, we talked extensively about all the muscles in the posterior compartment, that is the superficial layer of muscles, and we saw all of these. In this video, we're going to be looking at the deep layer, and there's not as much here, so this isn't going to take us near as long. So here's the posterior aspect of the forearm. All of these muscles have been removed from the previous video. So now we're looking at the deep layer, and we have 4 or 5 muscles here depending on how you're looking at it. We have supinator, abductor pollicis longus, extensor pollicis longus and brevis. This is really 2 muscles, and then extensor indicus. So the first muscle we'll look at is abductor pollicis longus. What does pollicis mean? We actually haven't seen that term yet. Remember when we looked at the ankle and the distal leg, we had hallucis longus? Well, hallucis referred to the hallux, or the big toe. So pollicis refers to the pollex, or the big finger, or we could say the thumb, right? So the first digit, that's the pollex. So when you see this term, it's having some action on the thumb. So this muscle would actually abduct the thumb. And this muscle is actually in red right here. Okay, so here's abductor pollicis longus. So its origin is the posterior surface of the middle ulna, radius, and interosseous membrane. You'll actually see that none of these muscles actually originate on the lateral epicondyle. Okay, that was reserved for the superficial layer. These deeper muscles do not originate on the common extensor origin that we saw in the previous video. Okay, so this one's on the posterior surface of the middle ulna, the radius, and interosseous membrane. And we can see the fibers extend distally, and what they'll actually do is they'll just insert on the base of the first metacarpal. That is the metacarpal of the thumb. And so because they're inserting out here, they would actually act to move the thumb kind of in this direction like this. And that is abduction of the thumb. Okay? This muscle is innervated by the posterior interosseous nerve. Second muscle we're going to look at is this one here in blue. Most of it we can't actually see, but this is extensor indicus. Now indicus refers to index finger. Index finger, that's your second digit. So that tells us this muscle, based on its name, should extend the second digit, or index finger. That's exactly what it does. This muscle is going to originate on the posterior surface of the ulna and the interosseous membrane. Again, most of the origin we can't see because the origin part of this muscle, or proximal part of it, is pretty deep. But the fibers are going to come down here, and we can actually see that they're going to insert on the extensor digitorum tendon to the finger. If we go back to the previous video slide, remember this yellow muscle was extensor digitorum, also called extensor digitorum communis. If we actually follow the muscle fibers distally, we actually see that one of these fibers, or tendons I should say, goes to the second digit, that is the extensor expansion. Remember, the extensor expansion was really just a fascial covering of all of these digits out here. And so the tendon, these fibers of the tendon of extensor digitorum, insert on that extensor expansion. Well, it turns out that extensor indicus, in this video, its tendon actually inserts on the tendon of extensor digitorum that goes to the second digit. Okay? And so by pulling on that tendon, it also acts to extend the index finger. Okay? So extending the second digit. And like the abductor pollicis longus, extensor indicus is innervated by the posterior interosseous nerve. Let's continue with number 3, extensor pollicis longus and then extensor pollicis brevis. These muscles are shown here in orange. And if we look at these 2 muscles, the way they're actually named is the longus is the one that inserts out more distally. That makes it longer. The brevis one is shorter because it's actually going to insert a little bit proximally to the insertion of the longus. Okay? But in general, both of these have a similar origin. Extensor pollicis longus originates on the middle third of the posterior surface of the ulna and interosseous membrane. Extensor pollicis brevis, a little bit different but similar, middle 1/3 of the posterior surface of the radius and the interosseous membrane. Okay, so that's where they originate. Again, the origins are more or less covered up by that of abductor pollicis longus. But notice that the longus is actually going to insert at the base of the distal phalanx of the thumb. Okay, again, it's pollicis, so it's dealing with the thumb, but it actually inserts on the base of the distal phalanx. Remember, the distal phalanx is the one that's further out. It's distal to the proximal phalanx. Extensor pollicis brevis only inserts at the base of the proximal phalanx of the thumb. So because the extensor pollicis brevis inserts a little bit proximally to that of the extensor pollicis longus, brevis is shorter, so it's brevis. Longus is longer out, so it's longus. Both of these muscles are innervated by the posterior interosseous nerve, and because they both insert on the thumb at some point, they're both going to extend the thumb. But they're going to do so at different joints. For example, because extensor pollicis longus inserts on the distal phalanx, this one's going to actually more or less extend the thumb at the interphalangeal joint between the proximal and distal phalanx. Extensor pollicis brevis cannot actually deal with the interphalangeal joint because it's inserting on the proximal phalanx, and so its extension of the thumb is more or less going to be at the metacarpophalangeal joint. Okay, but they both collectively are going to extend the thumb. Hopefully that makes sense. The last muscle here is going to be one that we've already talked about in previous videos, but again, it's in the deep posterior compartment, so we'll talk about it here. That is the supinator muscle. This muscle does not cross the wrist. Okay, it exists all the way up here near the elbow joint. Okay, its origin is going to be lateral epicondyle of the humerus. Now that's different than these. These ones in the deep layer, none of them originated on the lateral epicondyle. This one does, but it doesn't do anything with the wrist. So it originates on the lateral epicondyle, which technically is the common extensor origin, but this doesn't do extension. It's going to insert on the lateral, posterior, and anterior surfaces of the proximal third of the radius. So its insertion is only down to here. It doesn't come anywhere close to the wrist. And what this muscle is going to do is it's going to result in radioulnar supination. Some people would call it just wrist supination or forearm supination. Again, what it basically means is if you imagine just kind of holding your arms out in front of you with your palms facing down, well, if you do the motion where you basically kind of turn your wrists and forearms such that your palms are facing up, that's the process of radioulnar supination. And if we want to be really technical, the joint that's actually being moved is the radioulnar joint, the joints between the radius and the ulna. Okay. This is actually something that the biceps brachii can also do. Biceps brachii can also supinate the radioulnar joint. And so for that reason, we'd say that supinator is actually synergistic with that aspect of biceps brachii. And then the other difference of supinator with these four muscles that we just talked about is all of these are innervated by the posterior interosseous nerve, whereas supinator is innervated by the deep branch of the radial nerve, or the deep radial nerve. Okay? So, hopefully this video gave you a good understanding of these muscles in the deep posterior compartment of the forearm. Please make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel for future videos and notifications. In the next videos, we'll actually move into the hand and we'll talk about some of these bones here, okay? And then we'll get into the muscles of the hand. Please make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel for future videos and notifications. Thank you.